You know, Riddler is one of those villains that's actually been around since Detective Comics number 17 from April 1939. So he is one of the older villains in DC Comics alongside guys like Catwoman and Penguin and Two-Face. Yeah, he's really been around for a long time. But still, over the years, his story has changed quite a bit, but it seems to stay true to the fact that he is an obsessed criminal who loves messing with Batman. And this week, we're gonna take a look at 5 different versions of Riddler, his origins in the comics, and some other media. As always, this will contain major spoilers for all of the various iterations of the character that we're discussing. So if you don't want anything to be spoiled, do not read ahead. If you do decide to read ahead, then I guess just don't come crying to me when something gets spoiled. So starting off, let's talk about his most well-known origin, which comes from Detective Comics. Number 258, from September 1958. This version of the Riddler's real name is Edward Nygma, and he grew up in Gotham City as a very intelligent boy. Now his parents weren't very well off financially, so they sent him to live with his aunt and uncle, who were much wealthier, but also much less caring. They treated him very poorly, and because of this, he developed a strong hatred for them, and eventually devised a plan to get back at them. He began targeting them with riddles and puzzles, and often called them with clues as to where he was hiding or what he was doing. As they got older, these games became more violent, with Edward getting more and more cruel. In fact, the final confrontation between him and his uncle resulted in his uncle falling to his death while trying to escape him. After this, Edward was sent to Arkham Asylum, where he would eventually become known as the Riddler. Now, after being released from Arkham, Edward continued to taunt the police force with riddles and such, but soon set his sights on Batman sending him riddles with clues as to where he had hidden various bombs around the city. Now, after facing off against Batman and being defeated, Edward tried to frame Batman for the crimes he had committed. He believed that by framing Batman, he would finally have a worthy opponent. However, his plans fell through once again, and he was captured. Now, throughout the years, he would continue to go up against Batman, and even sometimes form uneasy alliances with him. For example, in Detective Comics number 351, the Riddler teamed up with Hugo Strange in order to destroy Batman. Now, together, they did manage to make quite a formidable team, with the Riddler supplying the brains and Strange supplying the brawn. However, Batman managed to outsmart them both and send them to prison. Still, this just goes to show that despite how many times he gets caught, the Riddler never gives up, and in fact, he only becomes more obsessed with Batman as time goes on. But moving away from comics for a moment, let's talk about the Riddler in Batman, the animated series. In this series, the Riddler's origin is slightly different than in the comics. Here, Edward Nygma works as a simple stage magician and game show host, but he's desperate to become more famous. So he begins creating elaborate traps and hiding valuable items around the city, leaving clues as to their locations. Then he contacts the GCPD and Batman, basically taunting them to try and find these hidden items. Now the reason why he does this is because he believes that if he makes a name for himself as a criminal, people will finally begin to recognize his talents and maybe even hire him for things like bank heists or something. But unfortunately for him, Batman outsmarts the Riddler once again, thwarting his plans and sending him to prison. However, later on in the series, the Riddler would break out of prison and team up with Poison Ivy and gain the ability to control plants thanks to her. With this new power, the Riddler was able to hold Gotham City hostage, forcing Batman to choose between saving the citizens or saving Gotham's plant life. Now, thankfully, Batman was able to come up with a solution that saved both the citizens and the plants, and the Riddler was once again sent to prison. But let us move away from that version of the Riddler now, and instead talk about the Earth 2 version of the character. Like a lot of the characters on this list, this Riddler is named Edward Nygma, and he has a similar motive to most of the others. He wants to be Batman's greatest challenge. But unlike a lot of the others, he actually starts out as a hero. In Earth 2, Edward Nygma is a billionaire who uses his money to help the people of Gotham, but he does so anonymously. One day, however, a villain known as the Clock King frames Nygma for robbing a bank, and this results in Batman suspecting him for quite a while. Eventually Nygma is cleared of the crime, but this experience causes him to become obsessed with proving himself to Batman, believing that by solving a series of difficult mysteries, he can prove himself to be a hero. Unfortunately, Batman doesn't see it this way, and instead views him as nothing more than a nuisance. This only adds fuel to the fire, though, and Nygma becomes more obsessed than ever before. Now, in the comics, the Earth 2 Riddler is usually portrayed as a tragic figure, a man who genuinely wants to be a hero, but just doesn't understand that being a hero isn't about solving mysteries. It's about helping people directly. And of course, it doesn't help that Batman constantly rebuffs his efforts and sends him to prison. But let's move on from there and talk about the Riddler's most recent origin, which comes from Detective Comics number 974 from August 2016. Now, in this comic, the Riddler's origin is retconned yet again, and this version of the character is actually named Edward Oscar Nygma. Now, this Edward was actually a computer hacker who worked as a detective in Gotham City. One night, he was assigned to investigate a string of robberies, but while investigating, he was attacked and killed. Now, somehow, his spirit was transported into the body of Edward Nygma, another detective from the GCPD, and when this happened, Nygma was put into a coma. Now, as Edward Oscar, Nygma slowly regained control of his body. He used his knowledge of the robberies to solve them, but he was unable to stop the Penguin from taking over Gotham's underworld. Now, after coming fully to in his new body, Edward decided that the best way to deal with the Penguin was to take him down with a riddle game. He began publicly humiliating the Penguin with riddles, and he also began to terrorize the Penguin's men, eliminating them one by one. He even went as far as to target the Penguin's allies, including Victor Josh and Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman. Eventually, Batman came onto the scene, though, and stopped the Riddler from killing anyone else. Now, although he was taken into custody, the Riddler actually enjoyed this. He got exactly what he wanted, attention. In fact, he loved it so much that he refused to leave his cell, preferring to remain the Riddler rather than return to being Edward Nygma. And with that, we have reached the end of our list. But as always, I want to know what you think. Do you prefer the Riddler when he's more of a tragic figure like in Earth 2? Or do you prefer him when he's portrayed as just a straight-up villain? Let me know your thoughts on the matter in the comments below. And while you're down there, make sure you hit that like button, because it really helps us out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.